What's up, everybody? Thanks for clicking this video. Thanks for tuning into my channel. My name is Simon Hill, Black American from Louisiana, coming to you live from Budapest, Hungary. Today is May 13th, 2024, about 11:10 a.m. where I'm at right now. Hope everybody had a great weekend. Shout out to Andre Beja in the chat. Andre Beja jumped in and said, "Hey, Simon." Shout out to Andre Beja and shout out to everybody out there who will watch this live or tune in later for the playback. And I hope everybody had a great weekend, great Mother's Day, everything like that. I had a relaxing one, spent some time with my wife, her friend. Of course, I came on live and chopped it up with the people. Then after that, we watched a movie. Just came back from work about an hour ago. So, yeah, now I'm going to come up here, read some stories because today is going to be a productive day. I got a lot of things happening. I got English classes later, got to head to the gym later, got to do some writing for culturalist theory later. So I got a lot on my plate, but I will not give up on this platform that I have here on my YouTube channel where I come and speak to the people directly and talk about issues that matter to our Black life and our Black existence. So YouTube is trying to take me out. So I need everybody here to support my channel, hit the likes, comments, share, everything like that. YouTube is always trying to find a reason to limit the monetization on my videos, shadow ban me and stuff like that. But I am getting a lot of love and support from people all across the world. In the past day, I had the biggest day of subscribers I've ever had in my channel's history, about 100 subscribers in one day. So shout out to all of y'all that tuned in. Shout out to the 15,000 people that have tuned into my channel for the first time in the past 2 days as well. It's a bit odd, imagine you're like walking in the park, minding your own business. You barely got enough money to afford a cheeseburger at Burger King. Meanwhile, 15,000 people are looking at you all across the world and you don't know who they are. We live in a very bizarre, strange time. The trail. That's why I put my name and my face out here so y'all know that it is real. Anyway, let's get into this topic for today. Today we're going to be talking about affirmative action, the attack on affirmative action, DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and the lack of opportunities for Black students to get higher education because we live in a racist country in America where the Republicans and the conservatives are hell bent on trying to erase any sort of gains that Black people have made in any sphere of our civic and social life. So Duke ends full ride scholarship program for select Black students in wake of affirmative action ruling. This was written for the Chronicle. I sent the link to the articles all in the description of this video. This was published by Mia Penner and it was published on April 11th, 2024. Duke is discontinuing its Reginaldo Howard Memorial Scholarship Program, a program for top applicants of African descent in the wake of last year's Supreme Court decision that ended race-based affirmative action in college admissions. The announcement comes amidst a nascent national trend with a number of public universities ending their own race-based scholarship programs in response to the Supreme Court ruling. Established in 1979, the Merit Scholarship, which also required some recipients to demonstrate financial need, covered full tuition, room, and board for a select group of Black undergraduates. The scholarship is named in honor of Reginaldo Reggie Howard, Duke's first Black student government president, who died in an automobile accident during his sophomore year in 1976. It is very much disheartening to hear that this program that opened the door for me to come to Duke is now being closed essentially, even though it will take on a new form, Junior Maya Harris said. In place of the scholarship program, the Office of University Scholars and Fellows is partnering with the Mary Lou Williams Center for Black Culture to establish the Reginaldo Howard Leadership Program. The new program will open to all undergraduate students, regardless of race, and will not include a competitive selection process. The Reginaldo Howard Leadership Program will honor Reggie Howard's legacy by supporting Black academic excellence, intellectual community, and leadership on campus through an intentionally designed series of engagement opportunities, wrote Candace Watts Smith, Vice Provost for Undergraduate Education, in the Tuesday email to Reggie scholars and alumni. Reggie scholars were informed of the plan to end the program in a Tuesday meeting. Scholars and alumni also received a follow-up email summarizing the decision, clarifying it was in light of changes to the legal landscape related to race-based considerations in higher education. Philanthropic funding previously allocated to the Reggie Scholarship will go toward the new leadership program along with need-based financial aid, according to the email. The scholarship provided funding for other activities, such as independent research opportunities and domestic and international learning experiences. All current scholars will continue to receive funding, but no new merit scholarships will be awarded for the class of 2028 and beyond. Reggie scholars said they were not involved in the decision to end the scholarship program. We were just kind of told what was happening as it was happening. Sophomore Hannah Gideon said, "We felt very powerless, to be honest with you. Historically, 15 to 20 black students were selected as scholarship finalists per year upon admission to Duke, according to the Reginaldo Howard Scholars website, which has been taken down as of Tuesday evening but can be accessed through the Wayback Machine Internet Archive. Finalists had to display a commitment to academic achievement, leadership, and community service and social justice. Scholarship recipients were then chosen from the group of finalists after an interview process with no separate application required for consideration. I think the Reggie is a program that has given me a lot over the years," Senior Drew Green said. "It's given me not only a community, but a group of friends, a group of academic peers that I enjoy spending time with. It has been a fantastic experience. So, of course, in that regard, I am gutted." While some Reggie scholars are disappointed, many expected the changes given the current admissions landscape and the Title IX complaint filed in September against Duke's Alice M. Baldwin Scholars Program, which alleged that the all female program engages in reverse discrimination. "We're all frustrated, obviously, but we've been expecting it for a while and kind of looking for next steps already," Gideon said. "We're trying to find ways to preserve Reggie's legacy." In January, Duke's Office of University Scholars and Fellows also announced a new timeline for its merit scholarship selection process. Under the post matriculation model, scholarship recipients will be notified about their award, which is awarded partly on the basis of financial need after enrolling at Duke rather than before. Very interesting. Amid the changes, Reggie scholars hope to continue carrying out the legacy of their namesake. "We just want to make sure that Reginaldo Howard stays in the conversation in any way, shape, or form that we can, because he was a very prominent figure in Duke's history, period. Not Black Duke's history, not Latino Duke's history, just Duke's history," Gideon said. And that's the end of the article right here. Every time I hear about these affirmative action rulings or cases where they want to strip it away, or they say that it's reverse discrimination or bigotry against white people, or they're giving black people an unfair advantage, I always think of Martin Luther King's quote, and I'm paraphrasing here. He said something to the extent of, to something, if something exceptional was done to the Negro, something exceptional has to be done for the Negro, or something like that. Basically saying, in Martin Luther King's own words, Martin Luther King, the people that everybody loves to celebrate, everybody thinks that Martin Luther King is, Jesus Christ reincarnated. Martin Luther King said himself, because something exceptionally wicked and evil was done to black people in America, something exceptional has to be done to aid and abet black people in getting on an equal footing with the rest of the citizens of the United States of America. This is the same thing I feel about affirmative action. Affirmative action, by and large, has not helped black people get more into higher echelons of American society or higher education and that sort of stuff. Every study has shown that, white women and other minority groups have benefited more from affirmative action policies or scholarships based on minorities and that sort of stuff than actual black people, especially black men. But whenever we have these programs, or have let the institutions have the option to opt into those sorts of programs or policies to try to create a more equitable or more diverse student body, they should be allowed to do it. Instead, this idea about reverse discrimination, that the universities, which are majority white, where the majority of people are going to universities in America are white women, followed by white men, and then other minority groups as well. The thing is that we need to actually try to make our student bodies diverse, because America is diverse and we need more educated people. One of the biggest problems in America is that we have a large underclass of people who do not have the access, the ability to have higher education, to go beyond just their high school diplomas. And also in America, we have too many high school dropouts, period. There is no reason at all that in the richest, most powerful, wealthiest nation to ever exist in human history, that people are not able to fund their education via public options or something like that. It's absolutely a shame and it's disgusting. This is what I would say to this whole idea. Of course, the ending of scholarships for Black students is a big problem, but what we need, by and large, is universal higher education for all Americans. Every American should be able to afford every single university if they're able to get in. At the end of the day, right? And you might think I'm trying to lift every boat with a rising tide, this thing, or bring everybody into it. No, affirmative action should exist. If universities want to offer scholarships to a people who have been marginalized historically in American society, if a university wants to make it easier for Black students to be able to afford these universities, these elite Ivy League universities, they should be able to. Clarence Thomas benefited from it. Why is he now closing the door from people behind him who want to follow in his footsteps and achieve the highest lengths of their career that they could if they had the education and opportunities? This is a shame. This is more proof of the white supremacist racism that permeates American society. It's an absolute shame that this is happening in this day and age. Everybody keeps saying it's 2024. Racism doesn't exist anymore. There's no more anti-Blackness. Then what do you call this when you see it right in your face? Now, let's go to this second story right here that I find very interesting. A white author calculated just how much racism has benefited her. Here's what she found. This was written by Harmeet Kaur, published on CNN, and this is Tracy McMillan, journalist and author of The White Botus, quote unquote, outside her home in Detroit, Michigan. Now, I watched an interview with Tracy McMillan with this guy named Adam Conover. If you don't know who Adam Conover is, he's basically this, comedy TV show writer, but he's also a very astute political thinker. And he does interviews with very interesting people all across the spectrum, right? Some, doctors, lawyers, writers, people like that. And he interviewed Tracy McMillan, and she was speaking about her book. And I listened to the entire interview, and it's very fascinating. I hope you go check it out. So basically, from what I remember of the interview, she calculated how the advantages that she gained as a white woman led up to the opportunities that she had in her life. One of the most interesting things she spoke about was that her grandfather was a banker at a time when there were only 8 Black American bankers in the entire nation, because of course finance was an industry that was hard for Black people to break into because of systemic racism. And her grandfather was able to buy a home in a suburb that had a racial covenant. And if you don't know what a racial covenant is, basically when the suburbs were invented in America, these sprawling mass areas where people were buying these McMansions and stuff like that, racial covenant said no Black people allowed in these suburbs. You cannot sell to them. You cannot rent to them. You cannot lease to them. No Black people are allowed to be in the suburbs. And the racial covenants existed, I believe, up until the 1960s, mid 1960s. But for a good few decades, while these suburbs were sprawling all through America, Black people were not able to buy the homes. And home prices, home ownership is one of the ways that many people in America are able to accumulate wealth, because home prices tend to just go up, or at least in American history, they have gone up. So when your parents die, they pass it down to their children. They have an appreciating asset. When they die, they pass it down to you. And now you have an appreciating asset that you can pass down to your children. Black people didn't have that. In a lot of places, they would not give loans to Black people. Many Black people rented for many, many decades, when homes were starting to pop up and stuff like that, because the banks would not give mortgages to Black people. And then, that's a continuation of the wealth disparity and the white supremacy in America. But I want everybody to look up the Tracy McMillan interview with Adam Conover, but after we read this article here. So let's go here. Exactly how much has racism benefited white Americans? So journalist and author Tracy McMillan did the math. The advantages she's gotten over her life from being white, she estimates, amount to 371,000 $934.30. That's a lot of money. Let's repeat that. The amount of advantages she's gotten over her life from being white she estimates amount to $371,934,000. Not sorry, man. The number is just so staggering for me. I can't even read it right. I know somebody's gonna say, "Is this guy an English teacher?" Yes, I am an English teacher. It's just astounding right now. Plus, I woke up only a few hours ago. Let me get my brain right. $371,934.30. That's a lot of money. All right. To calculate that number, McMillian tallied those benefits and divided them into two categories: a family bonus, which includes money her parents spent on her college tuition, educational loans she got from her grandfather, and an inheritance, and a social bonus, which includes jobs, apartments, and access to credit she's gotten throughout her life. Those resources and capital, she concludes, wouldn't have been able to her if it weren't for her race. In her new book, The White Bonus: Five Families and the Cash Value of Racism in America, which publishes Tuesday, McMillian traces just how much of her family's modest wealth can be attributed to policies and practices that have systemically hurt Black Americans. Through investigative research, interviews, and personal recollections, McMillian examines how racism has shaped her life as well as the lives of four other white middle class families. It was the one story about white people that I didn't know, she says. McMillian, who grew up in rural Michigan and now lives in New York, didn't have a particularly privileged upbringing by most standards. As she details in the book, she grew up in an abusive household, and an unfortunate accident left her mother unable to care for her. In college, McMillian juggled numerous jobs to support herself, and as a working journalist, she's had her own brushes with poverty. Despite those hardships, McMillian says the financial advantages she's experienced because of her race are undeniable. Her grandparents benefited from federal programs that largely excluded Black people, allowing them to build wealth that was then passed on to the next generation. That enabled her parents to help her pay to attend an elite university, which in turn opened doors to employment opportunities. But as she writes in the book, those advantages also come with the cost, not just to Black Americans, but white people like her. CNN's conversation with McMillian has been edited for length and clarity. So here's the first question to her. She said, "What made you want to write this book?" "I work as a journalist and I've gotten pretty good at understanding, at least structurally, how racism hits people who aren't white. I started to feel that I started to feel that just listening to people who aren't white talk about racism and how bad it was not sufficient to fix the problem. It could If we could fix racism just by having Black people tell us how bad it was, we would have fixed it by now. As a white American, I feel like I needed to take some responsibility for myself and understand how things were working on my end." I want to continue reading, but first and foremost, I want to give this woman a hand clap, hand clap, Tracy, hand clap to Tracy. It's one thing when you are a person who just says racism is bad, and it's another thing to do the hard look in the mirror, that self-actualization, that self-criticism that she is doing, acknowledging the amount of privilege that she is able to get, and going deep into her own family's history and other people's history and American history to find out why the structure that we have in America is the way it is. It's a beautiful thing. It's very rare to see because it's uncommon for men to be feminist. It's uncommon for a white person to be an anti-racist, a person who actively fights against racism, right? So it's very unique to see people who are so willing to challenge the authority and the privilege and the social structure, especially when talking about anti-Black racism. Because if you notice, white folks, the number one thing they hate is other white people talking about anti-Black racism. This is why that woman, Robin DiAngelo, in her book White Fragility, this is why she received death threats, why she has been laughed out of mainstream discourse and stuff like that, when all she did was talk about how fragile white people are about talking about racism, which then white people then began to give proof of because they just had a big hissy fit about her book, right? Which unfortunately a lot of Black people as well derided as well. But I think anytime a white person is willing and brave enough to speak openly, even if they get it wrong, about fighting anti-Black racism or how the problems we have in America stem back to anti-Blackness or white supremacy, we should be supportive of them, regardless of if they get it wrong. Because if at least they're on the path, they're a person that can help us reach that finish line. Now, I'm not saying that we need white saviors. I don't want anybody to get that confused. That is not what I'm trying to say. But we do need allies in the fight against white supremacy because we are trying to fight a system that oppresses all people. Let's keep that absolutely in focus as well. But what I'm just trying to say here, Tracy is very brave because this woman, for the rest of her life, really think about that. For the rest of Tracy's life, just writing about the advantages she's gotten as a white person will get her death threats from other white people. That's how serious they take this thing. So I'm going to continue here. What is the white bonus you describe in the book, and how is it different from white privilege? The white bonus is an estimate of the money a white person gets or saves because of white supremacy, public policies, or private practices. For me, this was a really humbling exercise. I've been on food stamps and had a stranger live. And had a stranger live in the bedroom of my one bedroom apartment to save rent through those periods. But at the end of the day, my family has spent about $146,000 to help me out since I left home. That's money they're not required to spend by the government. That's extra money they have. As I dug into my family story, every time I started to peel back the layers, I thought, would grandpa have had the money if he wasn't white? Well, no. He became a banker around 1930 when across the whole United States, there were a quarter of a million bankers and only 80 of them were black. Sorry, pardon, only 80 of them were black. Then he brought a house with a racial covenant, a clause in many 20th century property deeds that explicitly prohibited black people from owning or occupying real estate. My grandpa, on my other side of the family, was a millwright. That's a job that often was racially restrictive in practice for a long time. He got that job because he worked for his dad, who ran a welding business from his dad. My great grandfather came up from the Ozarks in the early 1900s and got a job in the foundry at a General Motors plant outside of Detroit. Foundries are historically a site of racial segregation because it's the worst, most dangerous, poorly paid job in the factory, and black workers were not allowed to get out of those departments. My great grandfather was allowed to get out of that department, got some skills and training, and was able eventually to start a business and buy a house with a racial covenant. All right. One thing I have to say, this is one of the tactics of white supremacy, right? A lot of white people say, I started from the bottom and look where I'm at. But I always think about this, anecdote that one of my friends told me. He's working at Walmart. At the same time, he starts with the white guy. White guy gets promoted to manager above him. And yeah, they both did the same amount of work, showed up the same amount of hours, put in the same labor, had the same level of education. But you'll notice in the deep south and stuff like that, you go to Walmart or any of these other, stores or businesses, whether they be mega chains or whether they be franchises or whatever, they always select the white guy to become the manager or move up the ranks, despite how hard that black man works. And this has been going on for a long time because that's what she said. Her grandfather was working a dangerous job in a steel mill. He was able to work it for a few hours or a few days, right? Probably a year or two or something like that. Then they elevate him up to manager over the other workers there who are majority black men who put in the same amount of hours. All right. Continuing here, both blue collar and white collar parts of my family were able to build enough wealth because they got that opportunity. Our life experiences are shaped by a number of factors, race being just one of them. Can we really measure just how much our race has helped or hurt us? All these are of the envelope estimates. They are bare minimums. I don't think there's a way to have a definitive number, but I think there's a way to have a meaningful number so that you can talk about this. As long as we sit here and say we could never measure that, we don't get anywhere. We're just having these conversations about privilege that are trying to grab onto a ghost. At least if we're talking about this in material terms, the argument is over the scale. When we talk about the advantages white people have had, we tend to think of people who are wealthy. Yet the people you profile in the book aren't extraordinarily well off by many standards. Why did you focus your book on the white middle and working class? This is a very important thing because I hate so much when white people say, well, racism can't be a big thing because, I've had troubles in my life being a lower class, work class white person, right? And, I never let anything stop me. And I've had hurdles too. I've been on welfare. I've been homeless. I've been hooked on drugs, all sorts of stuff. They say all these sorts of things, but they never ever consider the fact that because of their whiteness, they are not presumed to be a threat to society. They are not presumed to be less intelligent. They are not going to be profiled by the police as heavily as black men are. They will have better standing because their whiteness can help them get past certain things. Think about all the corn stars who did the dirtiest, nastiest thing, and then later they get to rebrand and be somebody's trophy wife, or they get to become podcasters, or they get to do something else with their life, right? Think about that. Think about all the white porn stars that could do that, and then how many black porn stars could do that? None, right? And that just might be a horrible example because I'm looking at a certain type of industry and a demographic of people. Plus, we're also talking about the sexism that women have to face as well, living under a system of global patriarchy. But still, the point still remains: white people still have so many advantages, even when they have so many disadvantages in life, like we all do have in life. Of course, I'm working. I have some things to my benefit. Being a man, being an American, being an English speaker, I'm able to eke out opportunities all across the world just because of those three things right there. Three things right there. Being a man, being an English speaker, being American has allowed me to work in several different countries. I acknowledge my privilege. I acknowledge that that's a privilege other people don't have. And I acknowledge that that privilege has allowed me to do things that other people cannot do. But why don't generally white people acknowledge the same? Yes, I've had disadvantages too. I am a black man in a white supremacist world where anti-blackness is rampant all across the globe. I am I I'm short, about 5'7". Haven't had as many opportunities romantically because I'm not 6'1". You know what I'm saying? And I'm not tripping off my height because I feel like I'm handsome and I get by. I get by. But you get what I'm saying? Like everybody has advantages and disadvantages in our life, but it should be generally understood at this point in human history, because of the circumstances of human history, that whiteness is an advantage, if you follow me. Continuing here. So, when we talk about the advantages white people have had, we tend to think of people who are wealthy. Yet the people who you profile in the book aren't extraordinarily well off by many standards. Why did you focus your book on the white, middle, and working class? The focus of the middle class started as an accident. I wanted to go up and down the class ladder and study how white advantage works through narrative, and then put everything into context. Frankly, I was not successful in finding broke white people or really wealthy white people who were willing to talk to me. But as the project moved forward, it just became really clear to me that the middle class is really the fulcrum for white advantage in the US. People in the middle class who are willing to talk to me understand how on the edge of falling into poverty they are. The middle class doesn't have enough wealth to feel comfortable. They're always trying to game out how they and their family stay taken care of, particularly in a society where we have allowed the safety net to be eviscerated. One thing that Tracy brought up in the interview with Adam Conover that is very interesting, right? When the civil rights movement happened and basically desegregation was federally outlawed and no state could do it under any circumstances, right? So many public services started to fall apart, right? All the government programs that were before the government that was giving out, free college education to former veterans and land grants and easy access to mortgages, federally subsidized mortgages, and all of that stopped. Public swimming pools and public parks and accommodations, right? All of that sort of stopped, right? Because white Americans, by and large, were thinking we don't want to share this with anybody else. So if black people are going to have good public schools, we don't want to have public schools at all. If black people are going to have access to the public swimming pools that everybody pays for in Texas, we don't want to have swimming pools at all. And this is crazy to me. And she really brought it home in her interview because she said something that was very true. When I was growing up, in Monroe, Louisiana, in an area called Forsyth or something like that, right? I forgot exactly the area where I was when I was very, very young, about 9 or 10 years old. There was a public pool. I don't know if it was public or private exactly, but we paid like a quarter or $1 to get in, and then we were swimming, right? And me and my brother were like one of the few black kids that were there, and it's mostly like white suburb and stuff like that. But now when I go to that area, and I've driven past there, not recently of course, but like a few years later, public pool is gone, right? All across the nation, like, all these public pools are gone, and now the public pools are at the private country clubs and people's backyards and stuff like that. You get what I'm saying? And now we wonder why Americans are obese. It's because nobody got fat shamed as a kid because they jumped in the pool with their shirt on. Now that part of our culture is gone. Now everybody just wants to take Ozempic and eat 20 Big Macs and stuff like that. You get what I'm saying? Like, we generally make our society worse. We don't have the public option of universal health care because basically white Americans by and large would say, if I have to share this with people who are undeserving and do not pay their fair share in our society, which they assume are the minorities, black people, Latinos, etc., we don't want to have it at all. And that only ends up hurting everybody. It's becoming a net negative to have this white supremacist mindset for our society and the laws that we make in our culture. Continuing here. So, how did you understand race before the white bonus, and how did writing the book change that? Before I wrote the white bonus, I understood racism as something that hurts people who aren't white. I understood racism hurts black people. Racism hurts immigrants. Racism hurts brown people. I could cite incarceration rates, and I could tell you about police violence and all of these things. But I did not understand that racism was something that actually actively benefits me. It's the thing that we all know, but that we pretend that we don't. White people actually do kind of know this, but the whole trick of American public discourse is that we never say that it's happening. Not even being able to articulate that's what's happening just completely ruins our ability to accurately address it. Absolutely. Hit the nail on the head, Tracy. Go, Tracy. Today, some white people in the U.S. argue that they are being discriminated against by workplace diversity programs, affirmative action, and other policies meant to address the legacy of racism. Given your reporting, do these feelings surprise you? I don't think it reflects reality. I also think the way that we usually talk about race in this country makes that a really predictable response. Take the GI Bill, a post World War II law that gave returning veterans free college, job training, and other benefits. We created this benefit that in practice was only intended for white people. Maybe a few people of color were going to be able to access it, and it was written as if it was colorblind, but everybody understood it was going to be implemented in a way that would benefit white people and nobody else. But we talk about benefits like that as if it was a natural right for an American to have. So here's a picture. Veterans in 1945 received books and notebooks as well as tuition and other fees under the GI Bill of Rights. Though the bill was neutral in its language, it often excluded black service members in practice. Yep, yep, yep. And thousands of black men went and served in World War II. Thousands of black men risked their lives to fight Nazism. And then when what does America do in return? Hire Nazis to work for the US government and then train a second generation of white supremacist Nazis who then will go on to say, the government never gave me anything. The government never helped my family. We never asked for handouts. We never were on welfare while they suck up all the taxpayers' money that come from all citizens, black and white, and exclude black Americans. Crazy. White people do not understand because this history has been hidden from them by previous generations that somebody in their family got something because they were white. Historically, the U.S. has been a lot more honest about the fact that they are denying things to people because they are black. But the inverse of that is also true. If you're denying something to one group of people because of their skin color, you're also by default giving it to the other group. White people do not have tools for that. This is the sort of stuff that if we were teaching accurate history will be part of the U.S. history curriculum, and it's not. The idea that white people are now victims of racism appears to be a key pillar of Donald Trump's campaign. How might your book help white people see things differently? As somebody who grew up in a community that was decimated by a raft of trade policies and an economic shift, people act like the only reason blue collar workers are mad is racism. That's not true. People are mad because they lost a path to the middle class that they could afford, and they're given this story that it's because of people who don't look like them. So not only are they getting gaslit about their experience of losing this path to the middle class, but they're seeing people suddenly talk with sympathy about the abuse that people of color have experienced. There's a lot of white people that are resentful because they've had stuff taken away from them and then told that they've never got it in the first place. The white bonus is about coming up with another way to tell that story. If white people benefit from anti-black racism, as you've documented in your book, will there ever have an incentive to change these systems? Very, very good question. We usually talk about racism equals bad for people of color or racism equals good for white people. That's one way to do it. But it's also true that racism impoverishes our democracy and undercuts our social safety net. For most white people, unless you are Elon Musk, you or someone you love is going to need a social safety net. Maybe you are safe in your middle class position, but you're going to know some young person that can't afford higher education and ends up in a really bad spot. You're going to know somebody who needs medical care they can't afford and they die because they can't get it. That stuff happens all the time, and we act like it's normal, and it's not. That hurts a lot of white people. When you start looking at racism not just as something that only gives or only takes, but as something that does both things, then you can ask yourself if it's worth being silent about it. I calculate $146,000 for my family that they probably had because of racism. I calculate $225,000 of money that I have had access to or equity I've gained probably because I am white. That's almost $400,000. But I also lost my mother because we didn't have public health care. And I had a really traumatic childhood because we didn't have public health care. Most of that money from my family and most of those bonuses I'm talking about with housing, I wouldn't need if we had affordable higher education. I wouldn't need them if we had affordable housing for everybody. I think there are enough white people now who understand that this isn't really working in our favor, but we don't have language for it. Absolutely beautiful way of putting it. Absolutely beautiful way of putting it. I love what Tracy is doing here. It's absolutely true. Our whole society does not benefit from white supremacy. White supremacy is not even about uplifting white people. It's just about some psychic benefit of knowing other people don't have what you have. Right? It's not even about protecting white children, because if that was the case, all the guns would have been banned after Sandy Hook. It's not about perpetuating the further existence of white people, because all of these abortion laws are only really going to affect minorities and black people, because rich white women, white people who generally have access to more capital, are still going to be able to fly to California or fly to New York to get an abortion. But if you're a black woman in Mississippi, you're going to have daddy's baby. You're going to have that three-eyed incest baby no matter what. You get what I'm saying? So, yeah, this is just going to continue down this path of America becoming a toilet bowl, of America becoming a worse and worse nation, because white Americans have some psychic a need, some desire just to see another people as the permanent underclass, as a permanently oppressed people. This is all that it boils down to. And once again, I'm not going to pigeonhole or paint all white people. That is not the point I'm trying to say. There is a small cadre of hardcore white supremacists who are in government and in various aspects of our lives and in our society, who do want to actively promote their wicked ideology, but the rest of society tacitly goes along with it. And in the past, there were people who put in place these systems that allowed this thing to continually perpetuate, which is why we have the system where we have today, where we have the white wealth and black wealth disparity in America the way that it is, why we have the disparate outcomes in the criminal justice system the way that it is. And that's because it was built and designed by real hardcore white supremacists who existed in the past, and is being perpetuated by people who are sort of indifferent to it or don't acknowledge the white supremacist origins of these institutions. And on top of that, you have real active white supremacists like Donald Trump and his followers and cadre and stuff like that, who actively still want to maintain the system that their foreparents, their forefathers set up. All right, continuing here. In the book, you explore the assumptions we make in the U.S. about who is deserving. As you're reporting details, when white people have historically received government help, they are assumed to have deserved it. Meanwhile, black and brown people often have to prove they deserve those same benefits. What did you take away from that? I came out of writing The White Bonus really convinced that the idea of deserving is a farce. The idea of who deserves what is just about making sure that the people who already have something get to keep acquiring more, even when they don't need it. It just lets people hoard power and money, and I don't think that's helpful for most Americans. We have enough resources that folks don't need to be terrified of ending up without a house. I think it's really easy to point at striving middle class families and all the effort they put into making sure their kids can go to college and this and that, but we've basically created the Hunger Games to get into the middle class, and it doesn't have to be like that. When my grandparents got into the middle class, it was like stepping into an automatic sidewalk at the airport. My grandparents were not savvy financial investors. They weren't moving money around. They weren't gaming out returns on IRAs for their 5-year old. They were just like, all right, I'm going to take care of my family. I'm going to get paid. I'm going to have a pension. America was much more comfortable talking about that like a broad right, when it was just white people that they thought were getting this. So, this idea that some people deserve more than others when it comes to basic sustenance is silly. Beautifully put. What do you hope readers will take away from this book? I hope that folks who have had to deal with families that fell down in supporting them in the way they would have liked can sorry, that they would have liked can feel seen. Okay, I'm going to read that again because I just want to understand that sentence. I hope that folks who have had to deal with families that fell down in supporting them in the way they would have liked can feel seen. I hope that readers who aren't white feel seen too, that somebody out there who's white does see how this is happening. So much of the way that we look at race in this country is through this lens of oppression. That's important. But if we don't talk about the bonus, we're not seeing things accurately. What I want is for people to work to end racism, because I think it's all in our interest. It is great and important to show up to things like Black Lives Matter protests, but it's also important to do the hard daily work in your community, talking to your friends and neighbors and trying to shift people's understandings so that we can all take care of each other. That's one way. That is one way, but I do think if you're going to write this book and talk about all the financial benefits that white people have been able to profit from over the years, Tracy, you have to also talk about reparations, right? If we're not going to have some restorative justice to something extremely exceptional that was done to the Negro, then something exceptional also has to be mentioned in your solution or what you want people to get from this. We don't just need more white people coming to Black Lives Matter protests, or white girls in college who feel guilty about being white, that they jump on soul pole for a few semesters. That's not what we need. What we need actually are restorative measures. We need reparations in financial cash payments to the descendants of slaves in America, right? Direct descendants, cash payments. That's what we need. Money, 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 money. And also opportunities. We need to stop this banning of affirmative action, like what's happening at Duke. Black people should be able to go to almost any university for free. There should be baby bonds as well. That's another thing that the country could do for almost every citizen. Universal basic income for every American citizen. Reparations for Black Americans. Universal health care. Universal higher education. Getting rid of the guns in our society, legalizing drugs. These would be good policies to sort of, how can I say, reform our society and also have some justice for the ills that were done to Black Americans. All right, go into the last article for today that I will read: why the politics of Republican Latinos suggest they want to be white. This is an opinion piece written for Newsweek, published on February 29th, 2024. Going to be reading through it because I find it very fascinating how people who are despised by and large by the majority white, very white, waspy, Republican voter base, so dearly want to be white, but they're also being classified as white. Like, when Latinos get arrested, no matter how dark their skin is, the sheriffs just mark them down as white. They don't even ask them their race and stuff like that. Like, they're trying to shoehorn Latinos in as white just to bolster the numbers of quote unquote, traditionally viewed white Americans, right? Which I find very interesting. But I'm going to be reading this. This was written by Efren Perez, professor of political science and psychology at University of California, Los Angeles. As our country gears up for another racially fraught presidential election, an American tradition, many political observers are wondering whether the roughly 30% of Latinos who voted for Donald Trump in 2016 and 2020 will once again support a Republican candidate who is openly xenophobic and anti-Latino. The answer is very likely yes, because many of these Latinos want to be white, but not in the way that you're thinking. To understand this Latino puzzle, we must transform our understanding about whiteness in America. Most people view white people as a group whose membership depends on skin color and other observable traits. But there is a more telling and perhaps more accurate way of thinking about this group as one whose membership is based on an ideological way of thinking, a worldview that demands both hierarchy and domination of others. Only with this perspective in mind can we begin to better understand Latino Republicans in contemporary times. I like the way he framed it here. Whiteness is a way of thinking. Whiteness is a way of thinking. There is no such thing as white people. By the way, there is no such thing as black people. We are all the same genetically, biologically. If you peel away our skin, we are generally all the same people, right? But yeah, whiteness is a way of thinking, right? When somebody says you are talking white, it's not because you're pronouncing your words a certain way. It's because you're saying stuff like pull yourself up by your bootstraps, or don't ask the government for nothing because the government never gave white people nothing. That's sort of ridiculous things. If you say stuff like that, you're thinking white, talking white, acting white, all right? But you are not being white, right? Anyway, continuing here. The conventional view of race in America is that it is a social construction, an imagined but meaningful category with real consequences for people's lives. This perspective views white people as being comprised exclusively of individuals whose skin color is relatively light and who find their ancestral origins in Western Europe. But in the current moment, this understanding cannot explain why so many Latinos keep such close political company with a mostly white Republican Party. Consider Enrique Tarrio, former leader of the white supremacist organization the Proud Boys, an ally of former President Donald Trump. Enrique is a dark-skinned Cuban man who looks unmistakably Latino, yet he fundamentally thinks like many Republican white people in ideological terms. Here are supporters of former President Donald Trump protest outside the Clark County Election Department on November 7th, 2020 in North Las Vegas. Latinos for Trump. Yes, see, Papi, see. We want Trumpo. Anyway, What Enrique Tarrio and other Latino Republicans today have in common is their earnest and devout investment in whiteness as an ideology. If whiteness is an ideology, then your skin color and racial classification do not matter as much as your genuine belief in a subjugating worldview. If whiteness is an ideology, then what earns you your bona fides is your commitment to pushing back politically and sometimes violently against a variety of minoritized groups who deserve to be put in their place and kept there. Basically, what he's saying is whiteness is not about some sort of cultural identity. It's not about liking a certain type of food or doing a certain type of dance or listening to a certain type of music. Whiteness is about subjugation, power, and the oppression of another group, because white can only exist with some sort of underclass under it, with something that is the polar opposite, right? I believe there's some philosophers out there, Afro philosophers, who say that whiteness has to exist. Whiteness can only exist with black people in it. Without us as black people, or the idea of the other, the whiteness would cease to exist and fold and crumble and die within itself. Continuing here. Does this mean that Latino Republicans are ashamed of their ethnic origins and would rather be white? Yes, in an ideological sense. Very interesting. What Latino Republicans, or what Republican Latinos today are reacting to, is the prevailing and accurate understanding of Latinos as a mostly progressive, democratic leaning, and genuinely aggrieved group. Latino Republicans aspire to be the kind of Latino who thinks that racial and ethnic minorities, especially black people, quote unquote, complain too much, who think that women should be seen, not heard, who believe we are being overrun by law breaking illegal immigrants, who feel that homosexuals and transgender individuals are unnatural aberrations, and so on. It is an ideological thread that connects all of these opinions together. Research showed that Latino supporters of nativist candidates like Donald Trump share a worldview that, among other things, denies the continued prevalence of racism in the lives of many Latinos and other people of color, despite wide evidence to the contrary. So, why are so many Latinos drawn to this ideology? In a field of race relations where white people are still, even if precariously, the dominant racial group, many Latinos are psychologically compelled to affirm this status quo by ideologically joining in whiteness. Mounting data driven research showed that for many individuals, there is a strong sense of security in bolstering how things are rather than embracing a highly uncertain future. Let's repeat that. For many people, mounting data driven research showed that for many individuals, there is a stronger sense of security in bolstering how things are rather than embracing a highly uncertain future, such as a changing field of relations between white people and people of color. It's more certain. It's a better society. This is the thing, too. A lot of Latinos are immigrants or the descendants of immigrants, right? In their home countries, they have white supremacy as well, or colorism at least. I'm not even going to get into it. Of course, there is anti blackness in the Latin world, Spanish speaking world, of course. But yeah, when they come to America, they say this is the land of opportunity. This is the land of freedom. How did they get all this? By subjugating black people, by basically beating up on the blackies and the darkies. And if that's how they got it, then I want to make sure I want to maintain this system, because I don't want America to become like the country I came from, like Panama, like Brazil, like Costa Rica, whatever, whatever. So if I'm going to come here and I pass as white, or I'm in closer proximity to whiteness, I will try to maintain the status quo because I want security. I just changed an entire country. I want security at least. So yeah, let's support the status quo that is basically going to try to continue to marginalize the people that created this society, right? Very interesting. My own research in this area has examined what belief in this status quo does to some Latinos. Our data showed that when Latinos are reminded about the virtues of the American dream, the popular but bankrupt idea that one can get ahead by simply working hard, they become more likely to agree with ideas like society is set up so that people usually get what they deserve. In turn, the more Latinos agree with these notions, the more supportive they become of harsher policies towards undocumented Latino immigrants, including ending temporary relief from deportation for undocumented immigrants brought to the U.S. as children. For these Latinos, if the way of doing things seems good and fair, then it is important to protect that system against its alleged enemies, even if some of those enemies are other Latinos. This way of thinking has found fertile ground in the Republican Party. As these and other examples suggest, it is a shared ideology with Republicans that allows Latinos to access whiteness. This is a key lesson to grasp and fast. Public shaming of Republican Latinos as race traitors, turncoats, or other names that impugn their credentials as real ethnics is unproductive and will not work because they are ideologically opposed to thinking of Latinos as a racially aggrieved group, members of the Democratic coalition, where the grand majority of Latinos exist, about 66% actually. So basically, he's trying to say, don't call them Clayton Bigsby's, as my guy Avery Adams told me to say. Don't call them COONS. Don't call them any of that. In fact, Latino Republicans revel in being a persona non grata among the larger Latino community as currently defined. What he's saying is they got trolls. They got people that like being trolls. They like being contrarian. The sooner we adapt to this reality, the better equipped we'll be to combat it in the marketplace of ideological ideas. Shout out to Ephraim Perez for this very, very interesting article here. Yeah, very, very cool to see that. Latinos are being critical as well. I know amongst Black people, we like to think that we're the only group that has this problem of people who basically just want to be contrarian and go along with the status quo, or even worse, support the people that are actively trying to make life harder for Black Americans, like ending affirmative action, like at Duke University, like not giving taking away qualified immunity from police and stuff like that, so that the police can be held accountable for when they shoot innocent American civilians, particularly Black men, in the back or in the chest, stuff like that. Like, there are a lot of Black people, unfortunately, who are on the Trump train and who are unfortunately on the conservative wavelength and that sort of stuff. And yeah, it's good to see the Latinos have their own set of problems as well. Not good to know that they have problems, but that their intellectuals are being critical of these sort of people and finding ways that those people could be combated, challenged, or possibly reformed into, advocating for a more just society. We don't live in a just society in America. The American dream is dead. People do not get what they deserve. A lot of Latinos like to think if you work really hard, you can become a millionaire. The number one way to become a millionaire in America is through stocks. Every day on the stock market, millionaires are made. And is that actual wealth is that actual value that's being created? No, it's literally numbers going up on a screen. If you have about $700,000 right now, you could put it in a certain account that will pay dividends for you for the rest of your life. It will compound in interest and that sort of stuff. Of course, you'll have to pay taxes, but you would make more money than you would working, 40 hours a week just to end up with 40,000 that year. You get what I'm saying? We live in an unfair society. Very interesting that some Latinos want to be classified as white in America. Well, the fact is that in Latin America, there are literally white people, right? Blonde hair, blue eyed, red eyed, green eyed, the red haired, green eyed, that sort of people, right? Like, those people do exist. Like in Mexico, they have white people. Like Cuba has white people, right? But they also have a mix of indigenous people, mestizo people, as they like to say, and also Afro Latinos as well. But yeah, once again, when people want to move to a new country, they sometimes, want the status quo. Like for me, I'm in Hungary right now. Everybody knows I'm a lefty, big lefty, but I'm not going to shake up the scene because honestly, I don't care about Hungarian politics, and I got a bigger purpose. I kind of want to get my education and then get out of here. Honestly, to be frank with y'all. But when you go to a new country, you generally don't want to rock the boat, which is why on my channel I get so much heat, because I'll go to any country and just keep it real and talk about my experience being there as a Black person, which is why my videos about being in any country, as you've seen, have continued to do numbers and grow this channel and that sort of stuff. But I'll just say this, we need to be vigilant as a people. We need to be unified on fighting against reactionary forces. We need to have a revolutionary mindset and advocate for the things that can finally create a just society in our country, and not continuing to just go down this, reactionary way of thinking that the immigrants are bad or that other people are making our society worse. It is the people up top, the capitalists, the capitalist class. It is the white supremacists that are the enemy of progress in America, and we need to be vigilant about that, and we need to speak out about it, which is what I'm doing here on this channel when I go live and chat with y'all. So shout out to everybody who jumped into the chat. That was Andre Beja. Hope y'all catch this live stream on the playback. Y'all stay tuned. Send me more stories that you want me to cover. I try to do 3 a day for at least an hour to come and chop it up with the people in between my English classes, where I work very hard. Subscribe, leave a comment, share. My name is Simon Hill, and peace.